Hello, Cleveland. Welcome to the Dawgland podcast. I am your host, Anthony Joki. As always, got my co-host Jackson McCurry alongside me. But as you can see, we have another special guest, Jacob Roach of the OBR and the Barking Browns podcast. Jacob, man, how we doing? It's good to have you. I know I wasn't here the last time you were, but I really enjoyed listening to you and Jack talk up draft prospects.
Hey man, I'm always happy to talk draft, always happy to talk to you guys, so I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, so we want to get you on here because the last couple of weeks have been very entertaining in terms of the East West Shrine Bowl, the Senior Bowl this week with practices going on. So we wanted to highlight a few things here. I guess the biggest thing is that started to break out since we last talked here on this podcast is the Browns met with Shedeur Sanders last week, and the Browns have the number two overall pick. It seems like Cam Ward is likely to go number one. That's still to be determined. But if the Browns want a quarterback at number two and Shedeur Sanders are there, they're gonna have to do all the homework, and they did meet with him last week.
Yeah, and I've talked about this with my co-host Casey Kinnaman over on the Barking Browns. We've talked about it. Casey keeps saying, cast a wide net, right? Like you have got to do absolutely all your homework on all of these quarterbacks. Like you get in there, you talk to them, you kind of because there's I think he's the most polarizing prospect in this class for a lot of reasons, and a lot of it doesn't have to do with football, like the football aspect, of course, but like the Deion Sanders thing. Like I got asked a question yesterday. It was like, do you really want to hear him on the national radio after a bad game talking about like what the Browns did, things like that? And it's like, oh my goodness, like I would just want to be able to talk about football. But they've said, okay, he may rule out some places. He might not want, Shedeur to play in Cleveland. And I kind of wrote in my article, I said, I really like the fact that they're able to get this very early in the Shrine Bowl, before the combine, before pre-draft visits. They're able to get in there face to face and be like, okay, so like what's going on with that? Because I feel like if I feel like Dion and even Shedeur are the kind of people where if you ask that, they're going to give that information to you. I think if in a closed door, in a closed environment, they have got to do absolutely all their homework. All of these quarterback prospects are not perfect. They're far from perfect, but give yourself a fighting chance. Get every little bit of information you can about these guys in the kind of mental space they're in too.
Yeah, and I thought Shador came out and they asked him about his dad, and he goes, who wouldn't want their father being involved in, a big step in their child's like professional job, like future and everything. And, and it's not wrong. I think anybody would want their dad to be involved and have, some type of voice. But you
Yeah.
look at the past, not just Dion, but you look at Arch Manning, you look at LeVar Ball, like there's been some instances where a dad, his influence is a little bit too strong. And, maybe Eli did have some say on where he wanted to go in '04, but it just seemed like Arch Manning was or Archie Manning was the one that's really behind him not going to San Diego. I mean, I I don't have a problem with Dion coming in, but then when he comes out in the media, he goes, I'm going to handle that business behind the scenes. And we know that he FaceTimed in with the Titans meeting. I would assume he FaceTimed in with the meeting with the Browns. If the Browns didn't show some interest in Andrew Berry coming out and actually, saying things like, yeah, we're not worried about Dion and everything, this makes you wonder, did Dion give the okay? Like, I've done my homework on you and Kevin Stefanski, and I would trust Shedeur going there. I mean, it would just seem like we would know more, I think, at this point about where Shedeur's where he's leaning, and whether or not he could come to Cleveland.
We saw this with Baker Mayfield before he was picked when, he kind of was given that opportunity to be like, hey, what if Cleveland selects you? And he's like, I think I could be the one to be the savior. I saw Corey Kinnan from Browns Wire kind of talk about that a little bit, like saying, are we discounting the fact that there might be a savior complex in there where, like, because whoever it is, I've said this for what feels like decades now. Whoever it is, the coach, the GM, the quarterback that finally lifts this up and becomes that guy, like you're going in the Hall of Fame. Like that's just my opinion because that's kind of the trajectory. That's it's just what it feels like, right? Like it feels like that's what the trajectory is. And yeah, man, like I think they've been given ample opportunities to shut down the Shedeur to Cleveland thing if that was going to happen. So as we get further, I know it's January as we talk about this, but as of right now, I don't believe that's an issue. That personally, that's just kind of where I'm at.
Hey, you talk about that. Whoever does win, they'll have a statue outside that stadium before they're even done playing. Like that thing will go up the
Yeah.
next year, whether it's the coach, quarterback, if it's Miles, who knows?
Yeah.
We'll see about that. More about the East West Shrine game. Who stuck out to you as having some good practices and really sticking out, during the game as well?
I really like these. Get my Shrine Bowl notes stands out here right away. A guy that kind of really stuck out to me was the Maryland defensive tackle Jordan Phillips. I thought he had a pretty good few days of practice out there. The Shrine Bowl is a little bit harder for me to get some of the film out there, but it really seems it's happening in the Senior Bowl too. But we're seeing a lot of guys in the trenches on both sides right now. Like if you need a defensive tackle, you need an edge rusher, things of that nature. This is kind of the way to go. But I did have Jordan Phillips kind of as a standout in the Shrine game. Not in the actual game. I didn't have him down for the actual game, but you get my point. I'm trying to yeah, and CJ West was the other one. I couldn't remember who the other defensive tackle was. The Indiana defensive tackle. Both are guys that are, you kind of expect when you're talking about East West Shrine. You're talking more later round picks, but guys that are really good quality depth players there. Kobe Bryant is a name, the Kansas defensive back, a guy I've been kind of high on for a while. I just love his competitive nature. Good athlete, plays physical. Like I think he can do a little bit of everything. And then the guy that really got me, um, because Andrew Berry has shown us his desire to have these guys that can do a lot of different things and wear a lot of different hats. Joshua Gray, the Oregon State offensive lineman, has played multiple positions along the offensive line. Probably a guard, might be a center, but probably is a guard at the next level. But he's played some tackle. He's got some inside-outside flexibility. Has done some of those things. He's a guy that's consistently on day 3 of the draft. And I just think that if you're looking late for a guy that's kind of been all over the place, been able to do those sorts of things, he really has stood out for me.
There's been a guy on our mock draft Mondays that we've been eyeing on day 3 as a pass rusher, Antoine Powell Ryland from Virginia Tech. What have you seen out of him going back to his college tape there? Trevor Sikkema gave some praise to him from the Shrine Bowl, some of the tape. What do you think of Powell Ryland as a potential edge rusher?
Ryan Fowler of the Draft Network was also giving him some praise from the Shrine Bowl. He's pretty twitched up. It's really interesting when you see these guys in some of these late conversations that have these physical tools, because a lot of times you're looking at guys later in the rounds where you're like, maybe he's just not a great athlete, but he's got production or he works hard or whatever it is. But I really am very intrigued to see where he eventually goes, because like he's got the production. He has a really deep bag of pass rush moves. Like he's not a guy that just wins one way. He's got counters. I think he's got kind of a hand swipe rip move. Really likes to fight with his hands very well. I always love to watch a jarring offensive lineman just be violent, right? And I don't think you can do that to him, which is funny because he's really twitched up too and explosive. And I just think when you've got a guy that can get off the line quickly and win with speed, win with power, and have counters, that's the biggest thing for me. And the is you're not always going to win on your first move, and a lot of these guys coming out of college don't have a ton of different counters because they're able to win with that twitch, able to win with that athleticism. More often than not, because there's a good chance that they're just a far better athlete than the offensive lineman they're going against. That's just not what's going to happen in the NFL. So you've got to have counters. So I think he's got a good spin move too, but I think he's got, kind of a developed game that is, I think, more technically sound than what some people give him credit for. If he goes rounds 4 or 5, I really think he's going to go earlier than some people think he's going to, especially if he can test well. But yeah, absolutely love what I've seen from him.
So, this week we have the Senior Bowl, and we've been graced with a lot of different media on X in terms of practice film and some of that fun stuff we get to see behind the scenes there. Obviously, the big topic has been Jalen Milroe, and what obviously having Tommy Reese, now our offensive coordinator, the connection there because Reese is at Alabama with him. So talk about what you've seen from Jalen Milroe. It hasn't looked great, but just what you've seen from there, and then kind of go into some other guys that have stood out for you.
With Jalen Milroe, all I've seen from him at the Senior Bowl is exactly why I thought he should have gone back to school. Like, this is an insane athlete, and you're not going to see that part of it. Like, that's the bad thing about it, is you're not really watching quarterback runs and things like that in these practices, because it's not set up for things like that. You're going half speed, you're not tackling to the ground, so you're not seeing some of that stuff, which is going to make a big part of his game is just not there. So he's really struggled. He will uncork the ball a country mile. We saw a beautiful pass today on day 2 where he just down the sideline. He's got an absolute bazooka for an arm. But the short and intermediate stuff, it's just not there. He just is not there. He's wildly inconsistent. He reminds me, some of the things you see him do, it reminds me of kind of early Baker Mayfield in 2019, kind of when he was trying, he felt like he was pressing really in that Freddie Kitchens year, and even at the beginning of 2020, where he was just throwing a fastball at all times. And like, that is a lot of what I see with Jalen Milroe. We find out the 8.5-inch hands, that's very concerning. I did not see that coming. It kind of explains some of the accuracy issues on that short and intermediate game, that maybe he doesn't have quite the grip on it. And maybe that's why he's putting so much oomph into it, is because the technical side of it, of things there, just isn't what it needs to be. It's just not been a good week for him. Has struggled some taking snaps. That's been a big issue for all the quarterbacks that have, Jackson Dart in particular, had a couple of fumbles on day 1 of practice, where we're just seeing these quarterbacks just having trouble taking snaps from under center, which is very concerning if you're thinking about them coming to Cleveland. But with Milroe, it's a guy that's crazy good athlete, got a big arm, short and intermediate. It's just not there. He should have gone back and played more football, but he hasn't. But the guy that has really kind of got my attention, Shedeur Sanders, man, that pass rusher from A&M, and it's insane because he had like 2 sacks this year. It's insane that the production wasn't there. And I was trying to figure out, there was a lot of buzz coming up, and I had watched him in the defensive tackle for A&M, but he was also getting overshadowed by Nick Scorton on the other side, and then you got Shamar Turner on the inside. Shedeur Sanders might be a top 20 pick in this draft. And I thought a couple of weeks ago that was kind of crazy, but like, he's gone down there. He's embarrassed some good offensive linemen. He is explosive. He's unfair. He can win with power. He attacks the football. He decimated Emory Jones on a strip sack today on day 2. Just absolutely. And the right tackle from LSU, Emory Jones, it's just, you can't he said, so there was some quote about him just being like, I'm going to come through your face. And then he started going through people's faces. He's just been an absolute menace. And it's hilarious because the trenches have been so good. And there's some other guys to talk about, but like the trenches have been so good because you'll be like, look at all these great defensive linemen. But wait, I thought the offensive linemen were good. And it just goes back and forth, and it'd be like offensive line will dominate the defensive line. The defensive line was a lot better day two today than the offensive line yesterday. But the biggest standout so far there has been Shamar Stewart.
And he's the skinniest 281-pound guy I've ever seen in my life. Because he's so like, when I saw the video of him today, I'm like, how is he 281? Because he does not look it at all. But you mentioned like pass rushers that were shining today. We got to talk about Mike Green because he absolutely annihilated Josh Connerly, who a lot of people expect to go in the first round, and Mike Green as well. But that film, I've seen it so many times today on X. Like Mike Green, if anybody didn't know who he was, and a lot of people do, obviously, because he's a projected first-round talent, he solidified it today with that one clip.
It feels like it, like, because, you know, he had, I think 16 or 17 sacks this year. I don't remember the final, the edge rusher from Marshall. And so a lot of people, and this is my favorite thing about the Senior Bowl and the East-West Shrine game is like, these guys from these small schools get to go and say, hey, look, like, yeah, I dominated lesser competition, but I can do what I did against that competition against NFL talent. Josh Connerly's my guy. He's my offensive tackle too. I've got an updated ranking coming out next week, and he'll probably stay right there at offensive tackle too. And he can struggle sometimes with power, but Mike Green, that's not really what we're talking about with Green. We're talking about the explosiveness, the athleticism, the twitch, the bend. And then he was like, oh, by the way, I'll go through a 313-pound tackle's chest and just take his soul on my way through him. I was I had checked my phone because somebody had sent me that clip directly in a text message. And I was at work and I just looked down and I'm like, whoa. I'm like, who is this? Is this like a D2 guy? Like, who did he go through? Because, you know, sometimes it can be hard to tell in those clips who they are. They got different jersey numbers on. And as soon as I realized that's Josh Connerly, who can at times struggle with power rushers, I'm like, okay, that is one of my favorite tackles being destroyed by a guy that's not supposed to be able to do that. Like, that's not supposed to be Mike Green's game. It's just, it continues to show you that like loading up, especially early in this class, and I think the sweet spot being from like picks 20 to 60 on defensive or offensive line talent, especially pass rushers, there are a ton of them. There's no way, especially if you're Cleveland, that you can come out of this class without a really good pass rusher to add to this defensive line because there are so many of them.
You kind of got into our kind of like last question here, talking about, you know, the strengths of this class. So set aside offensive line, defensive line, what other position in this class do you see some strength in, and then where do you see maybe the weakness here?
I really like what the tight end class has kind of done down there. I think Mason Taylor, the LSU tight end, has showed up pretty well. A guy that was not on my radar until about 2 weeks ago was Elijah Arroyo, the tight end from Miami. One of Cam Ward's favorite targets, kind of a one-hit wonder kind of guy where he just didn't have any production. That dude was getting vertical and routing some people up. Like, there were some plays there, the Miami tight end, where it's like, you know, there's a lot of these tight ends that maybe are not there as blockers because a lot of them aren't, but there are a lot of really nice, really good pieces that have some physical tools at tight end that we have confirmed. Mason Taylor's looked good. Terrence Ferguson has looked good. The tight end from Oregon has looked really good. Some of the wide receivers have been good. The pass catchers, it's interesting because the quarterbacks have been very mid, is what I would call the quarterbacks down at the Senior Bowl. I just don't think it's been very good. But these pass catchers, you know, primarily the tight ends, but then the duo, Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins, the two Iowa State wide receivers, I think have looked really good as well down there. But it's definitely the tight ends is kind of where my attention is. Not in the trenches, even though I want to stick in the trenches because the trenches have just been that stinking good down there. But the Senior Bowl has just continued to show you what this quarterback class is, and it's just some guys. Jackson Dart is having trouble taking snaps under center. I get it. Didn't really do that a lot at Ole Miss. He'll have a lot of time to figure that out. But when you're a guy that has kind of been talked about as a system quarterback and you cannot take snaps from under center, that it's really concerning to me. Like that because you can't tell me that Dart didn't know he's going to come in here and have to take a bunch of snaps from under center, and that he shouldn't have been practicing that. And then he fumbled the first one he had on Tuesday. Like I continue to look at that. The running backs have been fine down there, but you don't really get to see a lot of that because you're not live action hitting really until the game. So that's kind of a weak spot. But the quarterback class just continues to be the quarterback class. And I'd be remiss actually if I didn't say Azari Thomas's name, the corner from Florida State, who might be a first round pick. Like, I mean, this guy is coming for you. And it's just been a lot of fun to see that. But yeah, the quarterback class just continues. I just want desperately for somebody to just come riding in on that white horse, and it's just not happening.
Yeah, that's the disappointing thing is like there's no one emerging. Like the Browns have met with literally every quarterback except Cam Ward and Quinn Ewers because neither one of them participated in the All-Star game. So it's like it's part of why I think I'm kind of getting burnt out because there's like really no answer right now. And we won't have it really until free agency goes. And then, you'll have the combine and then we might get a clearer picture of what the Browns really want. So it's going to be interesting to see how that part shakes out with the quarterback position.
Yeah. And it's day by day you go start thinking and be like, well, could you trade for Derek Carr?
Geno Smith's that pie in the sky that like I don't know how it emerged, but like his name keeps getting brought up, but I don't know how possible that really is.
I don't know like why they would get rid of him is the thing. Like that's you don't have if you had somebody else like that behind him that you liked, like I could see that you'd be like, okay, that makes sense. But yeah, and I'm a Jackson Dart hater, and I really was hoping he would shove it down my throat this week. And there's more goes into it than just this week, but it just continues to be a situation where it's like not only do you have to suck to get a quarterback, you have to suck at the right time, and you chose the wrong time to suck.
I know.
Yeah, pretty much.
Of all years, this is the year that it hasn't been great. So, maybe next year, the year after that, some pretty good choices. But this year is when you're drafting number 2. So you have to try to figure this thing out as much as possible. So, we'll see how that all goes as we get on here more towards the draft free agency. What you got, Jack?
I actually got one more question for Jake, and it's offensive line because me and you, Anthony, we talked about like how much we love the trenches, how much that needs to be addressed at some point because like our line's not getting any younger. I was really disappointed on Monday when they measured like Wyatt Millum, Gray Zabel with their arm length under the outlier, and then these guys are getting worked out at guard. I'm seeing Emory Jones being worked inside as a guard. Like, Jacob, try to talk me off the ledge and like give me some names in this tackle class that like I need to go back and watch. Like, can give me some hope that maybe the Browns can find somebody in rounds 2 or 3 that could potentially be the left tackle, maybe even the right tackle, because I'm not sold on Dawgland because of his durability issues. I know Jack Conklin won't be around forever, so despite Millum and Zabel, like 2 guys I really liked watching early on, looking like they might move into the interior. Like, can you give us some other tackle names to keep an eye on during the process?
I would say one thing about Gray Zabel, he's had a fantastic week inside.
Yes, he has.
So if he slides a little bit on day 2, because he's almost 23, so like he's like 22 and some.
Jack Duffin's gonna say we
Well,
can't draft him.
see, that's going to be a thing now with NIL. These players are going to stay a lot longer. So when draft time comes, they're going to be older. So it's going to be a very hard thing to, grade out with that.
Yeah, and that's kind of been some of the stuff that I talked about this year. Pull up my positional rankings before I say anything. But that's kind of I've talked about that this year, just like even though the last couple of years because of the COVID year, and now you got the COVID years now, those prospects are pretty much out, but you had older prospects from that, and then like you said, it just goes right into because a lot of these guys are making more money in college than they're going to make on a rookie contract. Like so, it's like stay and make that money. Like absolutely, you should do that. I touched on Josh Connerly already, the Oregon left tackle. He's like 21 years old, was a high school running back because that's the kind of athlete that he is. So that's kind of there. Armand Membu, who had to pull out of the Senior Bowl, the Missouri tackle, plays right tackle, really good athlete, really love what he does. I think he's going to move the left tackle. He got sick. I just saw something from Dane Brugler. So he kind of did that too. Ariante Ursary, who's had a pretty good first day down there, the left tackle from Minnesota. This is a guy that's really interesting because you're looking at a dude that's I don't remember exactly what he weighed in at, but I know he was like around 340. He might have been 335. That dude moves. And I'm watching this guy and I'm like, what do you do when moving like that? Like he's immediately makes your run game significantly better. Like that dude is going to pick you up and he's going to deposit you over there on that sidelines. Like, but he excels in zone blocking schemes. So he makes that scheme fit. He's big, he's powerful. Footwork. It's really funny because he's a really good athlete, but sometimes the footwork's a little sloppy getting in and out of his pass sets. But he's kind of a bigger guy, so like once he gets moving, he's doing pretty good, but sometimes a little bit slow out of there. But I think I like Ursary a lot. I think he's kind of shown up a little bit. And of course, Josh Simmons is always the dark horse. We don't know what's going to happen with the health. We don't know. I think it was an ACL. But we don't, college doesn't report those things the way that we would like them to do. So I think that's a guy that you really got to watch because I think he probably goes in the first. I think this offensive tackle class is better than what some people initially thought it was going to be. The problem is they're different names. It's not who you thought it was going to be, but you're getting like Membu. I like a ton. Mbao is the Purdue. I think he's moving inside. If you want to go for an interior offensive lineman, there's a ton of those. I really like a lot of those guys. Watch Donovan Jackson. He might be a tackle. Like he busts out for I kept saying no, he's going to be Joel. See, I kept thinking he's Joel Bitonio, right? Because Joel Bitonio was a left tackle who comes in and plays left guard and has played left tackle a handful of times for the Browns. And I kept thinking that's what you're going to get from Donovan Jackson. He's going to be a kick butt guard who can kick out the tackle if he needs to. But keep an eye on him. And then Arizona's Jonas Savania. I like him a ton. I think he can hang a tackle too.
What about Ozzy Trapilo from Boston College? Because his name, like, I don't remember his name like very much the last few weeks, and all of a sudden, like, the Senior Bowl kind of showcases him.
I need to bring it up. There's one reason that I said no on him, and I want to make sure I tell you why. I love Ozzy Trapilo. It's a fit thing, if I'm correct. Yeah, he's a redshirt senior. So that's kind of the thing. I don't know that he'll be in their wheelhouse. 6'8", 309. He's just huge. Doesn't move that well. He's more of a power guy. So not really a zone blocking kind of guy, but really good pass blocker, Stonewaller. He's plays on the right side, but in 2022 he was their left tackle. So he's played on that side. He hasn't allowed us. He's 2 sacks combined in the last 2 years. So I like Ozzy Trapilo quite a bit. I think he's a little bit older, and I think he's more of a power guy. But there's no reason why you couldn't make it work. But he's definitely flown under the radar, but he's definitely got the eye of several people. I know. I think he's probably a day 2 pick. He's like my offensive tackle 7 or 8. That's where I've got him. I just don't know if he'll fit with what the Browns want.
All right, Jacob, we appreciate you hanging out with us again. Within the last month here. Obviously, I would imagine as the draft approaches, we'll have you on maybe a couple more times, 3 more times, who knows? But we really appreciate you hanging out with us. Let everybody know where they could follow you, where they can see you, all that fun stuff.
Yeah, guys, I'm always happy to jump on anytime I can. You can find the written works over at theobr.com. The rest of the lead up to draft season, mock draft Monday every week, player profile every Tuesday with a film room on one guy that may go in with the second pick and do some stuff like that, and then some weekly mailbags there. And Mondays with Sam Penix at 8 p.m. on the OBR's YouTube channel, Mock Draft Duel, and then I do the Barking Browns on Tuesdays at 8.
Jack, anything else before we get out of here?
No, man, just Jacob, thanks for coming on, man. Always appreciate your insight and what you bring to the table when it comes to draft prospects, man.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
All right. Be sure to give Jack a follow at JackMcCurry08 on X, Jacob at Roachism13, IZM. Give me a follow at Anthony Joki, JOKI. Be sure to follow the Dawgland. Thank you for subscribing to our YouTube channel. We've been doing really well with that, and just keep on doing it if you're listening to us on podcast form. The Dawgland there on X as well, Facebook, Instagram, all the social media platforms, really same handle. Until next time, always remember, go Browns.